Thank you. I'm going to go to a few of my colleagues, but I want to make some comments on this item first. We went to war more than 20 years ago in a number of countries. And I think we can rightfully criticize which countries we should have gone or why we went or what the intelligence was that led us to go. I also think there are very fair and legitimate and valid criticisms of the withdrawal from Afghanistan. I support the decision to withdraw from Afghanistan. It had been 20 years and it was never going to change. At whatever point we withdrew, it was also not going to be good. But I think there are very valid criticisms of how it was done and the manner in which it was done. But none of that detracts from the fact that as a country, we made a promise to a group of people that if they would help us and aid us in our fight, we would take care of them. We gave them our word. Now, I didn't interrupt anyone here, and we're not going to do it back. So you in the third row, this is your warning. Your outbursts are disrupting the conduct of the meeting. This is your first warning. Now, we gave them our word that if they helped us, that we would take care of them if they were in need, if their lives were threatened, and I believe we have an obligation to fulfill our word. And so when we're talking about interpreters, when we're talking about Afghan military, when we're talking about people that were willing to put their life on the line to aid us, to have speakers call in and say these individuals are anti-American is horrendous, and it is awful, and we owe an obligation. Because service members were asked to go out and give their word that if you sided with us and helped us, we would protect you if you need, and what we are doing is keeping our word to those individuals and those families. I also want to point out that refugees who come into America are the most vetted and most screened individuals who ever come to our country. We had a lightning strike last night, and your odds of being struck by lightning twice at the same time are 1 in 9 million. Your odds of being killed on U.S. soil by a refugee are 1 in 3.6 billion. The only documented case of a refugee doing anything on American soil happened before I was born, and it was someone from Cuba. We have not had cases of Syrians, of Somalis, of Iraqis, of Afghanis. They love this country. They care about this country. The notion that people are not being vetted is preposterous. They get sent to a third site first, a U.S. military base or locations in the Middle East and Europe and Africa and Latin America, where they are screened by every single U.S. intelligence agency, by every U.S. law enforcement agency, by everyone. I know we just had a debate. A bunch of people don't like fingerprints. They do fingerprints. They do biometrics. They run them through every database. Then when they actually are scheduled to arrive in America, they are screened again by United States Customs immigration officials for a secondary screening. And then they are placed into our community. And if we're a country that can't keep our word to people that we're willing to sacrifice for us, shame on us. And so I believe as a county, we have to do what we can to help these individuals and these families who are willing to do it. I also think it's easy to lose sight of our founding. We put a statue in front of our country that said, send us, you're tired, you're poor, you're huddled masses yearning to breathe free. I happen to think we meant it when we said it. And so the reality of who these individuals are, the rigorous vetting and screening process that they go through, plus the basic thing that we have a commitment to honor what we told them we would do. And it was a lot of my friends who made those commitments, myself in some countries. And so we can be frustrated with the exfil, we can be frustrated with what happened, all of that is fair, but we cannot escape our obligation to keep our word. And so I support these actions as they are today. I appreciate tremendously these individuals, the personal risk that they have gone through, the extent to which they have exposed their families, the challenges that they face. And as a country of more than 300 million people, I think we can do our part to help ensure they have a smooth transition and they aren't killed for helping us, and I'm pleased to support this item. With that, let me go to Vice Chair Vargas.
Thank you, Chair Fletcher. I really appreciate the intent of this letter. I just need a couple of clarifications, and of course, I support the intent and the premise. I just want to make sure that we're very clear about the actual request, because the first one, it says that we're going to direct the Chief Administrative Officer to have the County Office of Immigrant and Refugee Affairs work on the refugee resettlement agencies. And the Office of Immigrant Affairs and Refugee Affairs is still it's still in the process of being created, right? So I agree with you that eventually when we have a director, they should be the folks who actually coordinate the response plan. I think that's exactly why we, created this office. But I know that the folks from the Office of Immigrant Affairs they're going to share later on today that they're still in the process of hiring the director. So the director hasn't been hired, and we're going to hear that they still need a couple of other things to do. So my recommendation was that, you know, instead of assigning specifically the Office of Immigrant Affairs, that we work closely with the current Refugee Affairs Manager department that we have through the County of San Diego. They have been already working on various meetings, and they're working on different refugee settlement issues. I know the county is already part of a task force, the state refugee coordinator, refugee resettlement coordinator. And so I just want to make sure we're not asking for something that can't be done in such a short amount of time, because this is an issue that we have to address right now. So I think your intent is, if I'm understanding it correctly, is to make sure that we're directing someone in Health and Human Services to do this work. However, I don't think we have the person yet to be able to do the work, number one. And then two, also, the Office of Immigrant Affairs is going to be creating an Office of Immigration and Refugee, Immigration and Refugee Affairs Stakeholders Committee, which is going to be able to vet some of these issues as we move forward as well in the future. And so the county has been engaging in a lot of conversations as it relates to the matter, and so I am happy to support this motion, just with the adjustment that it's not necessarily the Office of Immigrant Affairs, but it's just semantics.
Health and Human Services.
Health and Human Services.
And then direct whoever's working in that realm.
Just to make it clear.
Not a problem. I was aware that the office, I think, has 2 employees right now and without leadership, but I had great faith in our CAO, and I thought that she would fill in the gaps, and that seemed to be the appropriate, but I'm happy to take that as amendment. At the end of the day, we know that we're going to have in excess of 1,000 coming. Well, many of the Afghans live in my district already. They're going to be the new ones, the ones that are coming now are going to be looking for family members to assimilate into their communities. And so I just want to make, we're really prepared. Yeah. And so I agree. Anything that will help and lift these folks, I think it's good for our community. The second part of this, that was the first portion, but the second part is we have a history of freezing assets, and we froze 9.5 million or billion, I forgot. I don't, billion, excuse me. That makes more sense. And I'd like for us to reach out to ask that some of that money be used. We have a history of using those frozen assets in the past to help refugees assimilate into the community, so that we're not just bearing it alone. If that money doesn't come from there, any federal monies that we receive, of course we want to chase down. I want to make sure that local taxpayers aren't burdened. I want to make sure that our local community isn't burdened. While we are a very welcoming community, we shouldn't bear the burden of all refugees coming to the United States.
So to that point, that was my second request, is that I wonder if it's if we're able to, the second item is really to ask for any additional funding available from both state and federal level. I think the funding that you're asking for is very specific, and you know, I think that it's beyond our jurisdiction. But let me just finish, and then you can give me your opinion. And so I think that I agree with you. We should be going after additional dollars from state and federal level to assist with the resettlement efforts. I think everybody understands that as part of the work that's being done at the federal level, money has been allocated already, right? And it's important to note that funding does follow each of the folks that are coming here with the resettlement. So there is already funding with this, but you know, I'm not opposed to searching for additional funds. I just think it's very limited to something that's not in our jurisdiction. And I think if we expand it to say funds from the state and federal government that are being allocated, I think it just adds on to that and makes it a little bit stronger. But that's just my recommendation.
So I didn't do that because we're already on it. And that money's already guaranteed and flowing and coming our way. So I didn't want to focus on an area that our team is already working on. This money has been used in the past. Over the last 20 years, I can give you, I have a whole list of examples where we did do it, but it was counties and states that requested that that happen. So I think at every level we should be asking that that frozen money is used for the refugees. It shouldn't be going to the new regime. We should be holding it and using it for the people that are fleeing with their lives. So the difference is that's an area that we haven't pursued, and just like we have a legislative office where we ask them to support different policies, asking for the money that's been frozen, just like when we froze the money in Iran, just like when we froze the money in Iraq, just like the whole history. We just recently, in 2000, took the money that was frozen from Cuba and used it to help Cubans that moved here, and there were refugees. So I'm being consistent with what we've done in the past. We may not have done it at the county level before, but many counties have done it. And so all I'm asking is that we send a letter to the appropriate authority requesting that they consider this. So that's why we didn't include all of it. I didn't want to micromanage because I knew our team was on top of it. And I didn't narrow down the first portion because I know that there's only 2 people, I believe, in that office now. Maybe we have more, I don't know. But I figured that we'd send the signal, and then, as Helen does, she would fill in the gaps, as she does so well and so aptly. So I'm happy to take the other amendment. We're already pursuing the money. If we're not pursuing the money, then I'll be happy to add it to it. But I think we're already doing that.
So if we change on recommendation 1, direct the Chief Administrative Officer to have the Health and Human Services Agency work with refugee resettlement agencies with the understanding it's the folks who are doing refugee, and we'll do that work. And then on the second one, let me ask if we might direct the Chief Administrative Officer to coordinate with the county's federal legislative representatives to pursue all funding to advocate for the use of Afghan government assets frozen.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah? Okay.
I just want to make sure that people are asking for those frozen assets.
So that would be both. Let me ask the seconder of the motion if you're okay with those 2 changes.
Yes.
Okay. Anything else, Vice Chair? No? Good, thank you. Supervisor Lawson-Remer.
Well, thank you so much, and thank you for to my colleagues for the work on bringing this forward. I just want to make a couple comments about the urgency of this vote today. We are about to see a historic number of refugees settle in the United States, potentially the most since the Vietnam War. There are currently 65,000 Afghans who have been evacuated since the Taliban took power and are waiting on American bases in the United States and overseas. Major resettlements are expected to begin the second week of October, with 500 Afghans resettled every week. And we've been told that given that 82% of Afghan refugees have family in the U.S., federal officials plan to resettle them in communities where they have pre-existing connections. San Diego County already has a large Afghan population, so we are expected to receive the second most refugees in California after Sacramento. So we're already seeing families come to San Diego, with thousands more expected in the coming months. The County of San Diego is clearly the best position to serve as a liaison and coordinate efforts for these Afghan families. We've always served as a beacon of hope for people looking for a better life. And now is our time to welcome Afghans seeking freedom, just as our region did for the Vietnamese and Iraqi refugees who came before them. Helping people flee persecution is one reason why I appreciate the work of this county staff and the board in creating a regional network to assist refugees as they navigate our legal system. Just want to take a moment to talk a little bit about my own personal engagement on this issue. As a student, over 20 years ago, I led national protests against what became a 20-year war in Afghanistan. I believed at that time that this war was wrong-headed and wrongly decided and bad policy and would lead to the kind of disaster that we see in front of us today. But we did it, and we now owe a huge debt to the people whose lives that we impacted overseas. And as a county supervisor, I know that the best way to close this chapter in American history and do the most we possibly can to rectify that debt and those lives that have been destroyed is by doing right by our Afghan allies. My team has been monitoring the Los Angeles County Afghanistan Task Force, and we've drafted a list of entities that we believe would be important allies for the county in doing this work, in serving as a liaison to the Afghan community. More could be added to that list. So with that in mind, if the maker of the motion would be amenable, I would like to add a friendly amendment, which is to instruct the county to create an Afghanistan task force led by the Health and Human Services Agency to convene and coordinate efforts with resettlement agencies, community-based organizations, and cities that are impacted. The task force can coordinate with our office or as Supervisor Vargas has pointed out, our burgeoning and yet emerging office to the extent possible and as much as needed. And the task force can include, but not be limited to, entities in the county, refugee forums, and cities that are impacted. So if the maker of the motion would be amenable, I would like to additionally instruct county staff to convene such a task force.
I would be open to it, but having worked in these communities and having represented them for the last 15 years, any organization that has any affiliation with terrorism in the Middle East cannot be part of that group. So CARE would be excluded. I just want to be absolutely clear about that.
I mean, I think from my point of view, we obviously don't want any organization that has any kind of affiliation with terrorism in the Middle East. So I think we're probably on the same page on that point. So.
And I do accept it.
With the explicit exclusion of the group you mentioned?
Sure. So, I mean, I think it's not, I mean, to me, that's not, it's beyond sort of the scope of our board work, but if that's important to the maker of the motion. My view is that the county should be doing the work to convene community groups. I think I would leave it to the discretion of the county, but certainly would exclude any group who has a terrorist network affiliation.
Why don't we put up the amendment as proposed, and let's see if we got the wording on it right. Give the clerk just a second here. Okay. Okay, is that consistent with what you said?
Yep, that's pretty consistent.
And
I'm happy to include the direction to not coordinate with organizations that have been designated by the Treasury Department as terrorist organizations.
Okay.
I don't have a list of who those might be in San Diego County, so I don't feel like I'm in a position to list explicit groups. But if there is an organization on the Treasury Department's terrorism watch list, then we certainly would not want to coordinate with them.
Or connection to terrorist organizations.
Excuse me?
Or connection to terrorist organizations.
Well, we've got to figure out some designation. I mean, I know the Treasury Department does designate them, so.
You may not be on it, but you're strongly affiliated.
You got to turn your microphone on, Supervisor.
You know,
Supervisor, you got to turn your microphone on.
When I divested our public pensions from Iran, I ran into this issue. There, in that community, either people are 100% for it or 100% against it. It's not helpful. And if you looked at the connections from the Treasury Department list, and I haven't looked at it recently, but we included groups that were affiliated with them. So there is plenty of funding coming from that organization going to Hezbollah. And so for the Iranian community, this was a super big issue. And in order to get their support in what I was doing, I had to make that exclusion. So I'm hypersensitive to it. Yeah. I know there's wonderful people, and they don't even know the affiliations, but I just want to be absolutely clear that I am not inviting that into my district because I will be in a recall.
But I don't think as a county we can get in the business of designating
we can say,
we can refer
or
to
an
the
organization affiliated with.
No, but we can't because now we're in the business of determining
I'll be honest, I'm not comfortable with giving that level of discretion to our county staff. I think it's really important that we stick with the Treasury Department's designations of what are a terrorist organization.
2 points. One, Chair and Board of Supervisors, this would be a Brown Act body. Okay, so number one, it would have to meet in public. Let me just stress that if it's created by the board. So that's one issue. And the other issue is the county can go off of a objective, known list. If you wish, you could add additional criteria, but you just have to be careful about that.
So let me just ask. We have the request. We have a motion by Supervisor Anderson, second by Supervisor Desmond, to accept as written as a friendly amendment. Will you accept that?
I would like to.
No, as written.
No.
Okay. I'll make a secondary motion, a substitute motion, to adopt recommendations 1 and 2 as previously amended, including recommendation 3. Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second.
Okay. All right, we have a motion on the table. Let's go, are you done, Supervisor? Let's go to Supervisor Desmond.
Lost my train of thought there. Well, anyway, you know, I think any person left behind, it was left behind in Afghanistan, be it a U.S. citizen, one of our warriors, or even an ally, is definitely a tragedy. I do think we need to help out those who you know, did make it here, while we also are supporting and taking care of our own issues. As a seconder of the motion, I'm not going to support the amendment. I wish we just...
You're no longer the seconder of the motion.
Oh, I'm no longer seconder. Oh, forget it. Okay. But I do appreciate the fact that Supervisor Anderson wanted to get out in front of this and go after those frozen assets as a possible funding source. So thank you very much.
All right, thank you. We have a substitute motion by myself, seconded by Vice Chair Vargas, to adopt recommendation 1, directing the Chief Administrative Officer to have the County Health and Human Services work with refugee resettlement agencies and other key stakeholders in a coordinated response plan to successfully address the anticipated influx of Afghan refugees into the county. To direct the Chief Administrative Officer, this is recommendation 2, to coordinate with the county's federal legislative representatives to pursue all available funding, including advocating for the use of Afghan government assets frozen by the administration to fund any and all costs to state and county resulting from the resettlement of Afghan refugees. And recommendation number 3 is to instruct the CAO to create the Afghan task force to convene and coordinate efforts with cities impacted, coordinate with Health and Human Services, including entities in the county, refugee forums that were impacted, and to not coordinate with organizations designated by the Treasury Department as terrorist organizations. With that, we have a motion and a second. We have 2 public speakers who had connections. We want to go back to those individuals and give them the opportunity to weigh in, and then we'll vote.
Thank you, Chair Fletcher. Last 4 digits of the phone number, 9518. 9518. Please press *6 to unmute. And please state your name for the audio record. You'll have 2 minutes to address the board.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Sean Van Diver. Thank you, supervisors, and all for giving me the time to speak today. I'm a Navy veteran, and I founded the San Diego chapter of the Truman National Security Project. I have several degrees in physical, national, and homeland security, and a bunch of different credentials. And today I'm spending time working on getting folks out of Afghanistan by leading the Afghan EVAC Coalition, where we work with the U.S. government and more than 90 private organizations to ensure that we're able to get every eligible Afghan out. And I have been absolutely devastated listening to some of the folks in the chambers today and hearing what they had to say. To all those folks in the room, I hope that they realize that, or supervisors, I know I got to talk to you guys. The same people that are agitating in that room right now are the same people that agitate about everything that we try to do, be it pushing for vaccination or pushing against lies and disinformation. It's no surprise that they're on the right side of history here as well. But I'm here to tell you that this effort has been the most American thing I've ever seen. Left and right, standing together without a care for who someone loves, who they worship, or for whom they cast a vote. All toward the ideal that, as Americans, our word means something. That statue in New York that says, "Bring us your tired, your poor, your huddled masses, yearning to breathe free," that we meet that ideal. They're wrong on this, and I really wish they would stop wasting the time of public servants trying to do the work for people. I do want to applaud the county for these efforts, Supervisor Anderson, Supervisor Loss-Riemann, and Supervisor Vargas, for your steadfast commitment to this population. I really, Supervisor Loss-Riemann, I really like the idea of the Afghanistan task force. I think it's really important, and in particular here in San Diego, where we have a large population of these folks. And Chair Fletcher, your comments really spoke to me. You and I have had several conversations about this topic, and in fact, you have yourself a special relationship with an understanding of the issues in Afghanistan. Thank you so much for your commitment to this issue and to keeping our promise to those who stood by our sides for 2 decades. That concludes my comments.
Thank you. We also had one caller that got disconnected, last 4 digits, 5273, 5273. If you'd like to address the board, finish your comments. It's 5273. Please press *6 to unmute.
Yes, I previously just gave comment. I'm not sure if I got cut off, but it's Mohanwood's masterpiece. So I'm okay for now. I just really disappointed again, especially with some of the Islamophobic comments, especially regarding care and whatnot. But it's fine. I already spoke.
Great, thank you. That concludes public comments on this item, Chair.
All right, thank you. With that, we will take each of these recommendations individually. We have a motion by myself, seconded by Vice Chair Vargas. First, we will vote on recommendation 1. Please vote.
Could you just restate which one that is?
Sure. Direct the Chief Administrative Officer to have the County Health and Human Services work with refugee resettlement agencies and other key stakeholders to coordinate a response plan to successfully address the anticipated impacts of Afghan refugees into the country.
Could you put up the amendment
When we
again?
get to it.
Okay.
But we're not, I understand
We're voting on a recommendation one.
that now.
Not yet, just
Okay,
recommendation
but
one.
I'd like to see the amendment again. Okay.
Chair Fletcher, that motion passes unanimously with all supervisors being present and voting aye.
We will now vote on recommendation 2. This is the one surrounding funding. Please vote.
Chair Fletcher, that motion passes unanimously with all supervisors being present and voting aye.
We'll now vote on recommendation number 3, which we'll ask the clerk to put on the screen. You can see it right there. Please vote.
Chair Fletcher, that motion passes with Supervisor Anderson voting no, all other supervisors being present and voting aye.